Oh my goodness. We are back as promised. Okay. Thank you to everyone who has stuck with me while we got through this treasure. I honestly thought the day would never come. I just felt like either I'm going to give up or this book is just going to somehow be multiplying as I go on. You know, like Jesus and the loaves and 12 fishes. The more I the more I break it open, the more comes out of it. So not quite like Jesus, like a sinister, backwards Jesus. So anyway, thankfully we got through it. Now I did think of this, and someone did ask me. Sorry, there is a sneeze that is like, it's like right here. I'm trying so hard to hold it in. If I would consider doing, or suggested that maybe yes, I should do a recap to like close the book out and say what I thought of it. I will. But not today. Because I just need a break. I just can't think about that book anymore today because it's all I've been eating and sleeping this book for 2 full weeks now, a little over 2 weeks. And I'm just so glad to be done. But yes, we will revisit it. We will talk about it, and I do want to hear all your comments. I want to see what you have to say about it, what you took away from it, if you took anything away. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was crazy? Did you think it was valid? Did you find meaning in some portions and not others? I'm not going to get into it much here because I want to save any of my thoughts for when I do a recap. So we will. Maybe this weekend. I'll save it for the weekend. So be on the lookout for that. Hi. But for now, we are going to start our new book, and I am really excited. And now I am mostly excited because this is going to be like a little launching pad, because I do want to read entitled, of course I forget the author's name, but he is kind of doing the circuit right now in Britain, talking about the book entitled, talking about his views on Prince Andrew and what he thinks should be going down. He is very, very knowledgeable about the whole situation, and I have watched someone else on YouTube read it. And I did ask this, if someone else has already read it, do you still want us to read it, or would you rather just watch someone else? Because I was thinking, well, we haven't read it together, so we can, even if someone else has read a book, it doesn't mean that we can't go ahead and read that same book, right? Because we're going to have different ideas and different takes on it. So I think it's still valid that we would read it in our group. Oh, Joey is being so needy right now. Hello, baby. Hello. Hey. Yeah, I know you're a nice boy. You're a nice boy. Yes, you are. If you've ever had a black cat, you will know that they are just the most needy of all the cats. Okay. So, because I want us to be able to read entitled, I want to first start with My Story by Sarah, the Duchess of York. Although she is the Duchess of York no more, because Prince Andrew has been stripped of his title, the Duke of York. And you have got to know that she is livid right now. She is probably stewing, and she probably can't eat, can't sleep, because she has been cashing in on this title even after the divorce for, I'm telling you, it's been like 30 years, more than 30 years. She's just been cashing in on this whole Duchess of York thing. And the thing that is so interesting about Sarah and Andrew, but not so much Andrew, but particularly Sarah, is that Sarah is almost like the precursor to Meghan Markle, okay? So how Meghan Markle is now using her, her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex, to, hawk her jams and hawk her wares and do all this craziness. She didn't come up with that herself. She's not the first one. She's not the first one at the bar. Sarah did it first. So when you think of what seemed to be an icy reception, perhaps, from the royal family. I honestly don't think it had anything to do with Meghan Markle's color, because let's be honest, I think for a long time, a lot of us didn't even know that she was biracial. I think she purposely kind of kept that a little, hidden until it served her purpose. But I think that they had dealt with it before. They knew when someone's out to make a buck. You know what I mean? Like, once you've met a type before, you recognize it again. So I think that they had seen it all before with Sarah. However, like I said before, Sarah, I always have a soft spot for Sarah, and I don't know what it is. I think it's because she just looks so normal. I said before, Diana was so effervescent and so tall and lithe and beautiful, and she had those like big blue shy eyes, and she would like look up like this, and I just don't relate to that sort of body language or personality at all, because I always felt my whole life that I was big and brash and just in your face, and I wanted to be a shy, quiet girl. I always just thought, oh, the shy, quiet girls are that's just where it's at. So I think that a lot of women did. Sarah did resonate with a lot of women, and I think also because she was kind of plump, you know what I mean? She was just kind of a normal gal, and she was very honest about her struggles with weight loss. And we saw her gain, significant weight during her pregnancies and go on Weight Watchers and, all this stuff. So I just think there were so many things about her that made her so relatable and made us like her. Now, meanwhile, I think behind the scenes, I think she was kind of a wheeler dealer, but, that may have been from her upbringing, like who knows, right? Well, we're going to find out in her words what she has to say about herself. Now, this book was written in, I believe it came out in 96, which is the same year as her divorce. Yep, that's right. So she really, she was in the royal family officially, for 10 years. That's it. But she packed a lot in to those 10 years. So we're going to start reading, and this is the back cover. It's just kind of this 90s gloriousness, which I love so much. Let me tell you, being a child in the 90s was just the best. I wish I could have been an adult in the 90s too. All right. And then here's another picture. It has lots of pictures, so I will show you all the pictures. And I do also have some royalty magazines from the 90s that do have Sarah Ferguson. They're still married, and I'll dig those out, and before it's all over, we'll kind of go through those, even if we just look at the pictures and see like, what's she wearing? All right, so let's begin with the introduction. The introduction is entitled Rock Bottom. Of all the Queen's homes, Balmoral Castle is so special. With its ivied walls and slender turrets, it stands like some friendly colossus on the Scottish Highlands. Balmoral was born in the mind of Victoria, the Queen of Queens, the woman in history I most revere. It was the royal family's summer home, a place for languid days and light labor. For me, it was a perfect haven, a staunch fortress against the arrows loosed my way since I entered Buckingham Palace in 1986. Balmoral was a tonic for the senses. Okay, I'm just going to pause here because from what I recall, I don't know if Diana liked Balmoral. I think she hated it. So I think that at the beginning, Fergie sort of fit in a little better than Diana, because Diana always wanted to be in the city. Like, she always wanted to be where everything was happening. But I think Fergie sort of clicked with the Queen at first anyway, because she was kind of a country girl, and the Queen, if she had had her way, if she was able to be, I think would have just loved to live in the country and ride horses and, stomp around the heather and all that kind of stuff. So I just wonder if that ever caused any tension, because I think there was some underlying competition between Diana and Fergie, and I bet you that is part of it, because Fergie probably just fit in so easily to country life, and I think Diana sort of always chafed against it and hated sort of the quietness and the solitude of being out in the country. Balmoral was a tonic for my senses. I loved the crackle of its morning frost and the smells of its heather and peaty soil, so delicious and earthy. Even the water there was brown from the peat, carried down from the mountains by the rushing River Dee. I loved most of all how Balmoral relaxed the man I had married, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. On this vast estate, my husband felt sprung from glaring eyes and incessant protection. He could drive about its acreage without a policeman at his side. He became easy and full of gentle fun, his truest self, and it was lovely to see. And as for me, I can say that Balmoral set me free. Back in London, I had become this stiffly disciplined woman, drowning in duty, cramped and shackled. But here I could take my dogs out and walk for miles, or we would trek up into the mountains for evening picnics and barbecues, in the little huts built by Queen Victoria for her beloved Prince Albert to use when he was out stalking. When I rode at Balmoral with the Queen, with our mounts willing and the air so sharp, I would feel almost at home, as though I actually belonged there inside this most exclusive family, in this most heavenly of places. It's having a little scratch. If ever that family needed a respite, it was in August of 1992. The Queen would later call it Annus Horribilis, the year of torn moorings and shattered peace. In April, Princess Anne entered divorce proceedings against Captain Mark Phillips. In June came the first published excerpts of Diana, Her True Story, a tabloid-flavored rendering of the Princess of Wales's bulimia, suicide tries, and marital problems with Prince Charles. Not one to be left out, I'd had my own bit to contribute. From early on that year, Andrew and I had been discussing a separation, not because we'd stopped caring for one another, but because I had reached the end of my royal rope. For 6 years, I had shouldered the demands of palace life. Okay. It just gives me pause. Because I know for a fact that she didn't do a whole lot. So anyway, we'll save that for Entitled. We'll just try to get through this, and then we'll read Entitled, and then we'll be like, oh, so she said this, but this is what was really happening, and we'll see the difference. For 6 years, I had shouldered the demands of palace life. I'd endured the constant scrutiny of the British press and the barely veiled hostility of the royal household, the courtiers who run the show. Gradually, relentlessly, they had beaten me down. They were killing me by inches. It was time to save my life. Here's the thing, is that I don't think that they beat you down or they kill you by inches, as she says, if you toe the line. And I think that if you're going to enter the royal family, I remember one time saying to my dad, something about like, oh, wouldn't it be so great? I think it was when Meghan Markle was marrying Prince Harry. And I was like, oh, wouldn't that be so great? Blah, 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 blah. So wonderful. And I remember my dad saying, well, I think that you would have to love someone very, very much to marry them if they were a royal, because you would have to live a totally different way of life and you'd have to give up a lot of things and you'd have to be prepared for the sacrifices that it entails. Now, obviously, we know how that turned out. But I'm saying that what I'm surprised about is that, you know, we have Fergie here kind of echoing the same thing as Diana, the same thing as Meghan Markle, in which they are just so shocked that there was an expectation and that there was going to be a change in how they were living and conducting themselves and where they were going and what they were able to do and this, that, and the other. And I just find that really surprising to me. I mean, I suppose, you know, Fergie and Diana were quite young, but they came from households that it's not as though they were from, you know, Podunk, Nebraska, and, you know, some backwater town in northern Ontario. Like, good grief. They would have moved in royal circles. I just assumed that there would have been some sort of understanding of what royal life entailed and the do's and don'ts and this and that. So it just always baffles me that they express this sort of shock and, you know, oh, I was losing my life. Well, anyway, I'll keep it there for now. We'll find out. And it's a little dramatic. It was time to save my life. In March, our plan to separate was leaked prematurely to the Daily Mail, that blunt instrument of a newspaper. A senior courtier publicly blamed me for the leak, an utter falsehood, and proceeded to flog me up and down. The BBC knew a hot story when it fell into one. The knives are out for Fergie in the palace. There were prompt apologies, but the damage had been done. I had been tagged unsuitable for royal life, and the charge stuck. I was frozen out, not just in the palace. The wind from all the doors slamming in my face might have knocked me over. A stronger person might have lashed back in righteous anger, but then a stronger person wouldn't have trapped herself in such a corner in the first place. Deep down, I knew that the charge was fair. I was unsuitable, always had been. Just 7 years before, I had been an anonymous working girl, hard-pressed to pay her rent, dodging summonses for traffic tickets. And then, with fictional suddenness, I was catapulted up into royalty, to be the object of cheers and curtsies, the toast of state dinners. The breath of fresh air, they called me. For a while, I coped with this mutation from private to public life. But I was never cut out for the job, and the harder I pushed, the more things fell apart. Even at my dizzy height of popularity, I knew that the clock would strike 12, and I'd be seen for what I was, unworthy, unattractive, unaccomplished, and finally, logically, undone. I wasn't the only one to suffer. In my wake, I had left a trail of destruction that stretched longer than the train of my supernaturally fabulous wedding gown. But I was unsinkable, and though March had been excruciating, it wasn't enough to finish me off, or to make me much wiser. Though bruised, I still stood upright, still clung to some small shard of dignity. But the other shoe would drop, I knew it would. I had written the script myself, you see, and I was hooked on sad endings. I just didn't think my boogeyman would penetrate the thick stone walls of Balmoral. Not here, of all places. Dear God, not just yet. 2 days after I arrived in Scotland, his hot breath singed my neck. Can I just say already, I love this. It's so overly dramatic. And I just know that we're going to get the best possible brush of, she's not guilty of anything. But I know there's going to be more to find out later. So, okay, let's continue. As usual, I had it coming. Just a week before, I had been on holiday near Saint-Tropez with John Bryan, an American who started out as my financial advisor, then became something more. If I could live anywhere in the world, it would be in the south of France. There is nothing to compare with its colors and smells and honeyed light. But this trip was a stupidity. The timing was rotten too close to Balmoral and my time there with Andrew, a man I still loved. It felt wrong from the beginning, but I'd long since short-circuited my intuition. I love that. It felt wrong, but I had already short-circuited my intuition. Like, baby girl, you don't need intuition to tell you that it's the wrong thing to go on holiday with a man who is not your husband. Okay? But I just love that, how it's framed. Like, but my intuition just wasn't working. John really wanted to go, and I wanted to make him happy, and I just went along with it. I was a puddle of water that summer. I followed the path of least resistance. I was committing social suicide without leaving a note. But while our holiday was misguided, even reckless, it was not as indiscreet as would be made out. Is this the trip where he's licking her toes? Do you know that? Google it. Google image it. We took reasonable precautions. A private plane to a private airstrip, a rented villa on a 10-acre estate 2 miles off the highway. As Beatrice and Eugenie were with me, okay, this baffles me. Guys, not only is she taking this affair to France with her lover right before she's supposed to go on holiday with her husband and I guess his family, but she takes her 2 little daughters with her. Scandalous. As Beatrice and Eugenie were with me, we also had a pair of royal protection officers at our side. As princesses who were fifth and sixth in line to the throne, my young daughters would always be safeguarded regardless of their mother's marital status. Ringed by densely wooded hills and vineyards, the villa was naturally secluded. Still, I felt twinges of something amiss. Could it be that you were there with someone who wasn't your husband? Not that Andrew was any better. Far be it for me to completely blame her when he was out there gallivanting. And we know the kind of gallivanting he was doing now, don't we? At the airstrip, I had seen a van and a motorbike that I hadn't liked the look of. A few days later, as I sunbathed by the pool without a top, I said to my friend Gabrielle, I have this feeling of being watched, and I don't know where it's coming from. When I got up, I covered my chest with my arms, but then I felt silly and paranoid. The soft heat of the Côte d'Azur will lull one's suspicions into slumber. After a day back in London, my daughters and I boarded a flight to Aberdeen to join Andrew and his family in Balmoral. I'd been lurching in a fog since March, not knowing which end was up, but Scotland began to work its emerald wonder to remind me that life was a dance, not a dirge. On Tuesday, I took the first of many calls from John Bryan. I'm afraid they've got photographs of our trip to France, he said. Rights had been bought by the Daily Mirror, one of the heavier-breathing tabloids. As a grand master of self-destruction, I knew disaster when I saw it, even if I saw it only after the fact. I don't think you got to be a grand master to know that this is bad. This does not bode well. Now you relax, honey, John went on in that smooth, humming way of his. I'll take care of it. Everything will be fine. I'm going to the High Court, and we'll stop them there. I urgently wanted to believe that my man of the world had everything in hand. That whole year I had needed someone to take the wheel, to steer my life and leave me on automatic pilot. John had relished the role, always knew just what to do, a magical trait to someone like myself, who wrestled with doubt every day of her life and often got pinned to the mat. Okay, now am I crazy, or does this have tones of All the Way to the River? Does she not sound a little bit like Elizabeth Gilbert? Do you think that Fergie has a love and sex addiction? Sounds like it to me. It sounds like the same sort of inner dialogue. Personally, you tell me. Okay. I told Andrew straight away. I never held back from him. We were always honest with each other. I will completely support you, Andrew said. I knew that John was down there, and that's our business and no one else's. I went up with heavy feet to brief the Queen. She couldn't have been pleased, but she is like her middle son. She is not easily rattled. Is Andrew the middle son, or is Edward? It must be Andrew. I just never heard of him being described in those terms. All right, let us see what happens, she said. On Wednesday, I got half a dozen updates, each one grimmer than the last. We're trying our hardest, John kept saying. That afternoon came more bad news. The High Court had refused to grant an injunction, failing to see how blocking the photos would serve the public interest. But there was one last hope, John reported. The judge told him that if the palace were to back us before the Press Complaints Commission, we could still prevent the Mirror from publishing the next morning. Forcing myself to stick to routine, I took Beatrice and Eugenie to swim in the local public indoor pool. People say that children pick up on your distress, that you cannot really hide it. But I can. I can block out my demons and live in the moment with my daughters. It is a great gift for me as well as them. But as soon as we left the pool, I felt enveloped by a black buzzing, a swarming dread as thick as sparrows. At 10 o'clock that evening, John called one last time. The deadline had passed, and the Queen's private secretary, Mr. Zed, had refused to intercede. I will forgo his name, not to be mysterious, but because his name doesn't matter. Like all the top courtiers, he was a creature of the palace establishment, no more and no less. Oh, girl. The shade. They're out, John said. He got a hold of the Mirror's first edition. There were 20-odd photos, all of them set by the scallop-edged pool at our villa, and they were worse than he had thought. Neither John nor I were the least bit out of focus. I'm sorry, John said. There's nothing we could do. Okay, I said dumbly, and put down the phone. With the halting voice of a crash victim, I relayed the news to Andrew. Don't worry, we'll just deal with it, he said. This prince rises to adversity. As a helicopter pilot in the Falklands War, he accepted the most dangerous of assignments to serve as decoy for enemy missiles. He is brilliant under fire in a drama, and that is the word he used that night in Balmoral. Brilliant, he said, as in, you are still wonderful to me. We will not let them defeat us. But I did not feel brilliant. I had a glass of brandy to cushion my fall into shock, and fall I did, to the center of the earth. This was pain beyond description, beyond sensation even. In Britain, where sex can never be mentioned and is therefore on everyone's mind, these photos would be the ultimate curtain twitch. I was a royal duchess and had shown affection to a man not my husband, and had been found out. End of story. No matter that Andrew and I were separated, I had been exposed for what I truly was, worthless, unfit, a national disgrace. I might have blamed John Bryan, or Mr. Z, or the ruthless paparazzi, or the barons of the press, but I didn't. I had a much nearer, fairer target, myself. Not because what I had done was so awful or immoral, but because I had enemies in high places, all the good gray establishment types who would hoist their goblets to my obliteration. Now I'd serve them the opening they'd sought, and they had seized it as jackals rip into carrion. There are no moral dilemmas on the jackal side, only hunger. It is not a complicated transaction. And the worst part was that I knew all of this. I was no more a babe in these woods. I knew it like my name. But it had seemed less taxing to forget and keep wending my blind and merry way. If you gauged me by conscious action, you might say I was not responsible for what I had done. I had let my life spin out of control long before. But at the end of the day, of course, we are all held responsible. We may not choose to answer our critics, but we must at last answer to ourselves. The clock in the tower was chiming. 9, 10, 11. My royal coach was reverting to pumpkinhood before my eyes. And still I had no answer, only a mute and bewildered, "Why?" There was no question of sleep. I sipped my brandy and sat in my bedroom with Alison Wardley, my children's nanny, and for that night, mine as well. I was the prisoner in the dock, already found guilty and knowing what terrible sentence she was to receive, and knowing that sentence would be just. I felt numb to my fate, resigned to it, but broken and grieving just the same. Alison never gave up on me, stayed patient with my lamentation. Somehow she kept me together. All too soon, for summer nights in Scotland are brief and flitting things, the ink outside turned cobalt, then gray, and then Thursday's first light touched the heather and the close-cropped lawns. It was my favorite time at Balmoral, all softness and solitude. Today it would be my morning of truth, my judgment hour. I rang up a loyal friend. "Just remember," he said, "the only person who has the right to judge you is the Lord. Ask God for forgiveness, and then just hold your head up high, pull your shoulders back, and walk proud." Good, brave words, but I could not face the family, and Andrew went down to the dining room alone. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh had their breakfast upstairs, but my husband's siblings were there, Charles, the heir to the throne, and the Princess Royal, Edward, the youngest, plus all the children, and an equerry and lady-in-waiting or two. It would be accurate to report that the porridge was getting cold. Eyes wide and mouths ajar, the adults were flipping through the Daily Mirror and the rest of the tabloids, until they saw Andrew and stopped, as it never feels quite right to be gazing at your brother's wife when she hasn't all her clothes on. All watched for Andrew's reaction as he went to the newspapers, but he must have been a disappointment. He casually leafed through them, as though digesting the cricket results. Then he brought a copy up to my room, and I faced the music I'd composed. John was right. It was the work of a professional. The photos were sharp and clear, in garish living color, and they strongly suggested that our friendship was more than platonic. I had been exposed, body and soul. I am a more private person than most people know, and a part of me expired that morning. The Mirror's headline, in typical hydrogen bomb type, read, "Fergie's Stolen Kisses." Nearly the entire front page was swallowed by two photographs. The smaller one caught me sitting next to John without my top. I was captured from the back at a 3/4 angle. The larger one depicted John and me lying on a blue and white striped lounge chair for a kiss and cuddle. These are the sensational pictures the world has been waiting to see, the lead story began. There were more photographs plastered over 9 pages inside. The Mirror had reportedly spent upwards of $100,000 for its booty and was out to get its money's worth. The shot that caused me the most furor, the one that would define me for years to come, showed John planting his mouth on the top of my foot. Toe-sucking, went the tabloid's refrain, and you could almost hear the grown men giggling. For the record, no sucking of toes had taken place on the south of France, a fact soberly acknowledged by the Los Angeles Times. That does not now appear to be the case, they said. John and I were actually playing at Cinderella when the picture was snapped. The whole scene was not nearly as intense as it was made to look. But if you read the Mirror's own back-patting editorial, you might have thought they had fingered a serial killer or busted some treasury-sapping racket. The poolside photographs, the paper pronounced, strip away all the lies, humbug, and hypocrisy that have surrounded the Duchess's relationship with Mr. Bryan. Fergie, now staying in Balmoral, has once again made our royal family look a laughingstock in front of the world. For Prince Andrew, it is a humiliation few men could bear. His wife and her American friend must be sent packing. If the royal family is to survive beyond the Queen's reign, it cannot afford another scandal like this. With the passage of time, the Mirror's language might sound slightly overheated. You must understand, however, that the London tabloids see themselves as principled protectors of the same monarchy they love to bash. If at times they must skulk about to look through other people's keyholes, so be it. There is a higher purpose involved. Once again, in fairness, I had made myself an irresistible target. On the bottom rung of Fleet Street, there are 2 surefire circulation boosters, an exposé of a royal, however slender in the facts department, or a picture of a bare-breasted woman. In that light, the Bryan photos marked a breakthrough for the press, the first time they had latched onto both their favorite items in one foul swoop. Usually it's fell swoop, but she says foul swoop. So, okay. And it goes without saying that they could not have achieved their historic coup without me. I had turned self-sabotage into an art form. Had anyone ever done it quite so well? Was there ever a more perfect masochist? But the horror wasn't nearly over. I still had to face the woman by whose kind permission I was staying at Balmoral. She was my mother-in-law and my sovereign, and a woman I cared about deeply. And this was how I had thanked her. I had let down a person who had never let me down, the last person in the world I'd have wished to disappoint. At 9:30 that morning, I went up to see Her Majesty, the Queen. Let me tell you, I would be shaking in my boots. Ugh. I would be mortified and petrified. All right, let's keep going. The Queen was furious. I had apologized, of course, but penance and contrition have their limits. There are some things which cannot be put right. Her anger wounded me to the core, the more because I knew she was justified. I had violated her trust. I had betrayed the bond that we'd built ever since she invited me to Royal Ascot in 1985 as one of the younger people she enjoyed having about. The Queen had been so saddened when Andrew and I separated, but she had never let it affect our personal ties, even as I became distinctly unwelcome at her court. There was something special between us, and maybe that was what moved me to mount some feeble defense instead of just slinking out of her room. Don't you think it's a bit weird that it keeps having to be me that gets caught? I said. Don't you think it's time someone asked, why is it always her? I can't be that idiotic. Later that day, the Queen and Andrew authorized Mr. Z to release the following statement to the press. We strongly disapprove of the publication of photographs taken in such circumstances. I curtsied my retreat, then went and found the one woman who understood what it meant to marry into the royal family and how hard it was to measure up. I went up to Diana's bedroom and sat with my friend. She couldn't say anything. She was just there for me, and she was great. For the rest of the day, I sought out other family members and apologized to them one by one. By early afternoon, I needed another brandy, but I saw the gauntlet through. They were all very gracious. Even Prince Philip, who could be stern at times, tried to console me. Lady Sarah Armstrong Jones, Margaret's daughter, was absolutely charming. They all knew that I wasn't the first person in the annals of royalty to be caught in an indiscretion. Still and all, I was leveled when I entered the room for dinner and saw everyone staring at me. I knew they must be seeing me topless or being nuzzled by a bald American. The courtiers eyed me sneakily, discreetly. The butlers and footmen gaped, and I felt naked in their sight. I would need a Rogers to express my degradation in that moment, and even then I would fail. There were no words for it. For so long I'd fed into my self-loathing, until now it had turned malignant. Had nearly taken form outside of me. I felt disgust in that dining room and a queasy fascination, as if they were looking at a burn victim. The sensation was strong and palpable, and I could not stave it off. I stayed in Balmoral for 3 more days as scheduled. Andrew spoke up for me at every turn, and Allison was staunch as Gibraltar. But I faced a trial by fire nonetheless. 3 days of national derision and more Mediterranean photos. The Mirror strung out its exclusive to the limit and ultimately sold 2 million extra papers. 3 days of vile headlines of "Fergie is finished" and "Disgraced Duchess of York to leave Balmoral for good." If anything, the Fleet Street boys were gaining momentum. "The monarchy is now reeling," the Daily Express wrote on Saturday, "under the biggest scandal since the abdication of 1936. It wouldn't have been right to deny the Queen her grandchildren on holiday, I told myself. So I stayed and got stared at as a term of my surrender. I would do it for the sovereign. I yearned to please her more than ever, though I feared it would never be the same between us. This will sound too pathetic, but I found some satisfaction in that unmitigated hell in my free fall from self-hatred. I was like the battered woman who gets what she's sure she deserves. I was good only for punishment, and punished I was, never fear. I pinned on my scarlet letter, "Mine would be a T for toe-sucking," and wore it everywhere with a sort of perverse comfort. I'm sorry, that struck me so funny. Okay. Okay. Mine would be a T for toe sucking. Oh my gosh, sorry, I'm melting my mascara into my eyeballs. And I wore it with a sort of perverse comfort. They all saw the true me now. There was no more need to hide. Okay, I will say though, like sometimes when you get caught doing something that you know you're not supposed to do and your whole reputation is just in tatters, there is some sort of sick relief sometimes. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's like, okay, there it is. I don't have to hide anymore. Now you all know, and I don't have to keep up the facade, and I don't have to, work to be this person that you all think I am, but I'm actually not. So I do understand what she's saying. They all saw the true me now. There was no more need to hide. If you know you are worthless and a sham, a fitting object for ridicule, it relieves quite a lot of pressure when someone rips off your mask and the world comes around to the same opinion. So it sounds like she always had imposter syndrome. That she was always trying to like present this veiled version of herself, and that it was always an act, and she was always very, very aware that this wasn't really her and she wasn't really the royal girl and all of that. And then once it finally is, shown to the public, and then sometimes people who are kind of in the situation, they will self-sabotage, and sometimes it's not even on purpose, but it's like your being wants out of that situation so badly that you will act up and you will make all this happen to yourself just to get free, right? Even if you don't really understand that that's what's happening. Or as the Americans like to say, when you ain't got nothing, you've got nothing to lose. Do Americans say that? I mean, I grew up in the U.S. too. My parents live in the U.S. When you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. I don't know that I've ever heard that as a saying, but those of you who are full-time in the U.S., please let me know. On Sunday, my getaway day, the tabloids carried a fresh scandal. Diana's so-called squidgy tape, 20 minutes of phone chat with a male friend. I wasn't the only one being spied on, that much was clear. I went into Diana's room and thanked her for taking me off the front page. It was our private, rueful joke. I took half a Valium, the only time I ever used it in my life. Then I flew back with my daughters to London, with no clue as to what the next day would bring. She faces a long, lonely exile, a courtier told the Daily Express that day, and it is cold out there. But was Fergie finished? I had hit rock bottom, no question. I was paying the price of an unexamined life and of a skein of wrong decisions made for bad reasons or for no conscious reason at all. I had flung myself into one peril after the next, like a diver who never checks the depth of the pool. Finally, my risks had caught up with me, as I should have known they would. To take stock, I was a non-person in the family. Any future I might have had there was now irrevocably ended. I had lost my husband, whom I loved unconditionally and who loved me back the same way. You know, they just must have had this understanding. Like, I think they had an open marriage, if I'm honest. I think the whole time that they were married, they had an open marriage because, like, he was always a philanderer. He was always out. And it just seems like from day one, like, she was out there too. And yet they remained so loyal to each other. So I think they must have had an understanding and they were both in on it. So it wasn't just like, you know, one was out cavorting and the other one was, you know, home crying into their peas at the dinner table. So anyway, and still to this day, they are like very, very close. So I'm sure we'll learn more about that as we go on, and even in the next book that we read. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. To take stock, I was a non-person in the family. Any future I might have had there was now irrevocably ended. I had lost my husband, whom I loved unconditionally and who seemed to love me, and who loved me back the same way. I had squandered the British public's esteem, a hard loss for a person who lived to please. To make matters worse, I was building a mountain of debt. As a single mother with few assets and less income than most presumed, I was in deep financial trouble, though I would never admit it. In short, I had reached my crossroads. The choice was stark. I could race on in the same old direction, keep binging on food and spending and work. I could skirt the darkness that way and the sad, shriveled self that lived there. I could just let my life happen, make it up as I went along, and hope I stayed a step ahead of the sheriff. That was the road I knew, the one more traveled on. It was also the route to insanity or an early grave. The other path was new to me and by far the more frightening. It was a slower, broader road, and it led to the deepest part of me, the best part. Well, usually the analogy would be that it's a narrow road because the idea is that it's like difficult to traverse. But anyway, okay, we'll keep going. The best part, but to get there, I would have to confront the broken shell of my existence and how empty I had been, even when intact. I'd have to put myself back together when all the king's horses and all the king's men had already written the job off. Most of all, I'd have to face my pain, and my pain had always beamed like the sun to me, too intense and enormous to look at it for long. I was only 32 years old, but I sensed that my next wrong turn could be my last. Would I learn what I needed to solve my own riddle, and before it was too late? On Fleet Street, and in the stale, hushed quarters of Buckingham Palace, the betting was against me. We should note, however, that those widely esteemed, supremely well-connected, and oh so powerful gentlemen had underestimated me. And that is the introduction. I would love to keep going, but I promised movie night to the family. So now I have to go watch Dog Man. But thank you so much for being with me. Okay, tell me what you think. Okay, am I alone in thinking that there's somehow shades? There's shades of this in this, right? Don't you think? Can you see sort of a little bit of the same kind of language, maybe? And the same sort of issues, perhaps? I think that's very interesting. Okay, Well, again, thank you so much. And this weekend we will do a recap on All the Way to the River. It's just I needed a little respite, but I will gather my thoughts. I'll try to make a couple notes, even though, I'm on the fly. I like to read to you while I'm reading it for the first time because I like all my reactions to be just at the same time as you're having your reaction. I want to have my reaction at the same time. Anyway, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate you so much. Please like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Hit the bell. I love to read your comments. Absolutely love it. So please engage, and I will see you tomorrow or maybe later tonight if I have lots of time and I am just too excited to read the next chapter. Okay, bye. Mwah.